The Mexican Grand Prix was an amazing race, full of chaos, and I'm totally here for it because in the end, that's what we love about Formula One. We love close fights, and the result we got was not perfect, but very close to it. And although it's already Friday and the Brazilian Grand Prix is already happening, I still think it's very worth it to take a few minutes and take a look into what happened in Mexico because I've got some really interesting things to show you today. So we have our analysis improvised booth here, and I'm going to show you some of the graphs that I think are really cool. This is the first one and it's a staple. It's probably one of those that will appear in every race because it's always relevant. It's the global race pace. As you can see, Norris was clearly the fastest, but one interesting thing is to analyze the pace of the others behind him because Hamilton, Piastri, Berman, Antonelli, Russell, Verstappen, etc., they all had a very similar pace. And that's really interesting, and I'll tell you why. Because Verstappen is there with them. Verstappen, just like Lando, did only a one stop. Only one stop, so that means that Lando and Max stayed on older tires for longer. So it's only logical that their time would be slower because they were on slower tires, but the one stop was actually the best strategy for me, and I think, I don't know why they were the only ones trying the one stop, because at a point it became really clear because the softs were holding on so well. In the mediums, although they weren't the best tire for the race, they were still pretty good. And basically Verstappen is there and with a very similar pace to all the others, which is amazing for me. And Lando too. Lando has an amazing pace for someone who did a two-stop. This is only considering clean laps. I've eliminated all the outliers, the pit stops, the safety car laps, and I also eliminated here the laps where drivers made a mistake. So this is just in clean air, or even if they're in dirty air, clean laps where the driver didn't make a mistake. But there is one driver in specific that I think it's the highlight of this set of data, and that's Hamilton. And why is it, Lewis, that I'm choosing for the highlight? Because he's here shown as the second fastest, although not by much, but the second fastest overall. But he didn't finish second, he didn't finish anywhere near it. And although he had a terrible race in terms of getting a penalty, which by the way was deserved, I'm not gonna get into it, but I think it was kind of deserved, at least following the rules as we have them today. But I still want to highlight that he had probably one of the best performances that he's had in a Ferrari the whole season, really. The qualifying was good, he was starting in a good position, the pace was good. It was a matter of he didn't get the start that he wanted. He then proceeded to make that mistake with Max, got a penalty, and that completely put him off because all the other guys were on a similar strategy with similar pace. So he was with his hands tied behind his back. If he was second, he probably would have stayed that way because his pace was really good if he didn't have all the penalties and so on. And before moving on to the next graphic, I want to talk also about Charles, because his race was really good. It was completely the opposite of Hamilton. He didn't have the most amazing pace during the race, but he got the position, he got the place, and then he just squeezed everything that he could to bring that Ferrari home in second place. And although he did cut the corner and he really should have been served with a at least 5-second time penalty, he wasn't because the stewards were kind of sleeping, I guess. And thanks to that, he managed to bring home P2, and the podium that's been running away from Hamilton since the beginning of the season, it's just getting even further with only 4 races to go. In a weekend where it was probably one of his best in terms of performance, he wasn't able to capitalize on that, and Leclerc took the trophy. Speaking of which, there's no way we can let go the chaos that happened in turn 1, where Leclerc was one of the main protagonists, as well as our beloved Max Verstappen. They were the two drivers that cut the corner. I mean, Leclerc cut the corner, Max just went around and he managed to save an incredibly difficult car to save because he was completely opposite lock to manage to bring the car back onto the track safe and sound without losing any bit of it, and he did an amazing job doing that. But first, let's analyze how it all started. This is the data from the start. We have here the speeds, the throttle, the brake, and the RPMs. And if we add to this graphic the table that I've just put here, you can see that just off the launch, Max got 0.1 seconds from Charles. And that was very important and a crucial part to get side by side and to get the 5 side by side we got by the end of the straight when you got to turn 1. And the reason for that very good launch is very clear to see. If you look at the RPMs, when they drop the clutch, of course the RPMs are going down. Max goes to a little bit lower RPM, and that actually enables him to get a little bit more traction down. So if you look at the throttle graphic, you can see that the throttle for Max goes to 100 much quicker than it goes for Charles. Just in doing that, he's already getting a lot of time. If you look at the speed chart, the blue line is a little bit over the red line, so you can see how Max is gaining speed quicker. That's not a lot of speed and that's not a lot of difference, but in Formula 1 every tenth of a second count, and here it was just the case. By the end of the straight, they were all side by side with each other, and as we know, Max locked up big time because he was completely on the outside and went over the grass, saving the car and rejoining the track. But he actually tried to brake earlier, and he actually did, not tried, he did. But he was in such a bad position on the track over that curb that takes a lot of grip out of the car. And despite going off the throttle first compared to Charles, he couldn't manage to get the car stopped in time. He locked the brakes and he went over it. Charles, on the other hand, managed to get a much more normal curve, but the problem is he didn't really want to make it, so he just decided he was going to cut it. And he did, because from the footage, I was left with the impression that Charles could have made the turn if he wanted to. He just didn't want to, he just chose to do that. And that's a very common thing when there's not gravel. That's why I'm such a fan of gravel, because if you have gravel, no driver is allowed to do this kind of thing. In that sense, I kind of agree with Russell in the sense that this enables a lot of drivers to do some shady things to just get in front because they know they won't get any penalization. Charles's case is a little bit different because that was not some shady going around like kind of Max did, but it's a clear corner cutting situation that should have been punished and wasn't, because probably there was a lot of chaos happening. And speaking of that save from Max, this is also an interesting thing to see in this graphic, because if you take a look, after he gets off the brake, he doesn't get on the throttle right away because he was on the grass, it was very slippery, he had to control the car and managed to not go into the barriers, and so he waited and waited and waited and tried to get the car as controlled as possible before applying the slightest bit of throttle when he felt there was some grip there, and then rejoining the track. That's a very interesting thing to see here, and yeah, the data simply makes it very crystal clear. But the battle between Leclerc and Max wouldn't end up there, because as we saw in the race, Max pulled off an amazing one-stopper after being behind Behrman. After that scuffle with Hamilton, he still managed to pull off the one-stopper. He was completely dominating the soft tire in the last stint. As you can see, that line, it's almost a straight in the second stint. In the first stint, we can see that there is a very off time there, and that was the lap where he was fighting with Hamilton and both kind of got off the track, and it was a very slow lap. But for all the rest of the first stint, it was good, but not as smooth and as consistent as the second stint, because the second stint was not only quick, it was consistent throughout the whole stint. It was like the tires weren't degrading. It was simply amazing, and just shows also how the tires weren't degrading this week. The softs were holding on for a very long time, were definitely the tire to be in the race. Lando also had a very good first stint on them, and Max saw that and decided to do just the same because he started on mediums. He took the pain early on, and it was a lot of pain because those tires were slow. He couldn't get past even Behrman, but he then changed to the softs and he pulled off an amazing race. Charles was also one of the guys doing just a one-stopper, of course. It was the best strat. I don't know why more teams didn't try it. And it was a battle for the ages, at least by the end of it. Because Charles was so in front thanks to the buffer created between him and fourth place where Max was, because Behrman was in the middle and was hindering the Max Verstappen pace. But Max just managed to claw back. Bit by bit, he was completely dominating. If you look at the line on the second stint after the pit stop, he was always faster than Leclerc, and considerably so. And by the end of the race, they were completely together, and the only thing that stopped Max from getting P2 was really the virtual safety car, which, once again, another bad call by the FIA in my opinion. Carlos's car was in a safe position, in a very slow part of the track, sector 3. It's very unlikely that the car is going to crash there. A single yellow flag would do just fine for the situation, and they kind of robbed us of the battle that was brewing for so long, and Max fought so hard to get it that it's a shame that he didn't get to fight for it. But it's still a good result, and with 4 races to go, he's so close to the top 2 that I really want to see how this will spice up things, and if this is actually going to be the spice that the McLarens need to finally start fighting with each other, be feisty, and take the gloves off completely to have the most amazing 4 races for the rest of the season. The last piece of data that I'm going to show you today is a heat map with the mean sector pace for each driver, and it shows which driver was quickest in each of the sectors. And it's very, very interesting because in all the weekends I expect the McLarens to be very slow on the straights. I expected it this weekend too. The McLaren is kind of draggy, the DRS is not the most efficient, so I was expecting him to be slow. And Norris kind of fit in that, because if you look at the top speed average, and I'm sorry for the colors, I don't know what happened, but it's still readable. Norris didn't have the best top speed, and I was expecting that. But what I was not expecting was Piastri to be the fastest on average throughout the race. He was, of course, inside the DRS for most of the race. For example, when he fought with Antonelli and Russell, he was always in the DRS, and that, of course, aided him get the best average top speed. But still, a McLaren getting that, for me, it's kind of unexpected. And he got the overall fastest first sector. But if we look at the second and third sectors, but especially the second, this is the differential sector, and this is the one that for me made the race for Lando. It tends to be so good in these medium to high speed corners, and the second sector in Mexico is rich in that kind of corner, in that medium to high speed corners, those S's. And comparing to Piastri, it was a staggering 0.435 seconds faster than Piastri. And for two drivers driving the same car, this is such a huge gap. Probably a difference in setup, probably Piastri has not been in his best form, and he was a bit affected probably by the events on the past few races, but still, this is a huge gap. And the sector 3 was not such a huge gap, and I really think it's because of this type of corners. Piastri probably didn't have the best setup to deal with them, nor the confidence to do so. Although the third sector was slower, it was just 1.5 tenths, which is not that much when you see that he got the first sector nailed on, and Norris was actually much slower because his car was probably more tailored to the twisty parts of the circuit and not the straights. And also, Lando probably never got the RS, only when he was lapping other cars. But the second sector, it was all on him, and it was a masterclass. And I can't stress this enough, we have to take into consideration that some of these drivers, namely Norris, Verstappen, and Leclerc, they were on the one stopper, so these times, and especially for Lando, to be making the benchmark for the third and second sectors in a one stopper compared to other guys in the two stopper with overall fresher tires and more grip, it was simply amazing. But, and this is a bit of a spoiler, I'm really happy to see that in Brazil, in the sprint shootout, Piastri was like 25 or something hundreds of a second away from Lando and got P2. So after a few races where he probably was under a lot of pressure being the first in the World Championship and being expected to do a lot, probably when he lost the lead, the pressure relieved a little bit and he is now being able to be himself again. But it's still very early on and we'll see how it goes. But for this race, I was really shocked at the difference in pace. So that was all for today. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you liked the video, don't forget to subscribe the channel and leave a like, that would help me a lot. And I'm really excited to see what Brazil has in store for us. I will be making a video dedicated to the sprint race, like a first part dedicated to analyzing for the sprint shootout and the sprint race, and then a separate video analyzing the main event. So stay tuned for that, and I'll see you on the next one.